The sun blazed mercilessly over the dusty town square, where voices rose above the crackle of dry air and the creak of wooden planks. The auction block stood tall in the middle of the crowd, a grim stage for desperate souls, and on it, chained, trembling, yet holding her chin high, stood a young woman named Clara. She had the kind of beauty that wasn't meant for the eyes of greedy men, but for open fields and wide skies. Yet here she was, paraded as property, her future hanging on the call of strangers. The auctioneer's voice bellowed across the restless gathering, his tone sharp, commanding, feeding off the crowd's hunger for ownership. "A fine one here," he declared, slamming his hand against the wood. "Strong arms, sharp eyes, fit for labor or whatever else you see fit." The men laughed crudely, some stepping closer, others nudging each other with sly grins. Clara's stomach knotted, but her gaze did not falter. She knew showing fear only gave them more power. But inside, her heart hammered with a desperate prayer that somehow, someway, freedom would find her. She had not been born for this, had not been raised to be someone's possession, and every fiber of her being screamed against the chains that cut into her wrists. Yet hope was thin in a place where mercy was just another word forgotten in the dust. Then, just beyond the crowd, a lone figure leaned against the wooden post, hat low over his eyes, his presence quiet but commanding. A cowboy, rugged and unshaken, his shadow stretched long as though it belonged to the land itself. His name was Colton Hayes, known by few, understood by fewer, but those who had crossed his path whispered of his unyielding spirit and his hatred for injustice. He hadn't come here to trade cattle or seek supplies. No, he had come because he heard rumors that the auction block was once again stealing lives, turning people into property. And when his eyes met Clara's, just for a heartbeat, something in his chest stirred. The auctioneer slammed his cane again. "Who'll start the bid?" Voices rose, money flashed, and Clara's world began to blur under the noise. She clenched her jaw, fighting tears, her body stiff like stone. She would not break. Then, just as the crowd reached its fever pitch, a voice, steady and firm, cut through the chaos. "She won't belong to any of you," it said, low yet carrying. The cowboy stepped forward, removing his hat, his eyes locked on Clara. "She'll walk away with me." Silence fell like a hammer, every head turning toward the cowboy who dared defy the law of money and power. The auctioneer blinked, thrown off balance, before snapping, "And who are you to claim her without a bid? This is no charity, stranger, this is business." The crowd buzzed with disbelief, some sneering, some murmuring admiration at the cowboy's boldness. Colton's jaw tightened as he stood firm, boots planted deep in the dust. Business or not, no man should be sold like cattle, and no woman should stand chained before vultures, he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through stone. Clara stared at him, her breath caught. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever risked anything for her freedom. But here was this man, unknown and fearless, standing like a wall between her and the world that wished to consume her. The auctioneer scowled. "If you think words will win you anything here, you're a fool. Pay the price or walk away." Colton's hand moved to his belt where a pouch of coins hung. He tossed it onto the block with a dull clatter. "That's more than any of them can muster," he said. The crowd gasped, whispers rising. Gold, real gold, not scraps of silver. The auctioneer's eyes widened with greed, but before he could snatch it up, one of the wealthiest landowners pushed forward, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can walk into my town, throw money at my feet, and steal what I came to claim?" He spat. "That girl belongs to me." Colton's eyes narrowed, and the air thickened with tension. "She belongs to no man," he growled, stepping closer. "And if you think otherwise, you'll have to settle it with me." The crowd shifted, some backing away, sensing the storm about to break. Clara's chains rattled as her knees weakened, not from fear, but from the surge of hope threatening to burst inside her chest. She wanted to believe. She needed to believe. Colton's hand reached out, palm steady, fingers open, not toward the landowner, but toward Clara. "Come with me," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, time froze. The weight of her suffering, the years of fear, the endless silence, all of it collided with this single chance. And though her wrists still bore the cruel bite of iron, Clara felt the stirrings of freedom. She stepped forward. The landowner's roar shattered the moment. "You'll pay for this, cowboy!" he snarled, signaling to his men, rough-throated brutes armed with fists and blades. They surged forward, but Colton was ready. With one swift motion, he pulled Clara off the block, his arm strong around her waist as he guided her behind him. Dust exploded beneath his boots as the fight began. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some cursing, most scattering like frightened birds. Colton's fist struck first, dropping one man into the dirt. Another lunged with a knife, but the cowboy twisted, sending the blade clattering harmlessly away. Clara's chains weighed her down, but she refused to cower. She grabbed a broken plank from the block and swung at one of the attackers, striking true, her spirit ignited like fire. Together they fought, not as rescuer and victim, but as two souls refusing to be crushed. The landowner, red with fury, tried to push through the chaos, shouting, "She's mine! No man takes from me!" But Colton's voice rose above his rage, deep and thunderous. "She's not yours. She's her own. And I'll burn this whole town down before I let you touch her again." The fight raged until the sheriff's whistle cut the air, the law finally stepping in, guns raised, ordering everyone to stand down. But by then, the point had already been made. The landowner, humiliated, spat into the dust and stormed away, his men dragging their bruises behind him. Clara, breathless and trembling, looked up at Colton. His shirt was torn, blood stained his knuckles, but his eyes, those eyes, were steady, calm, unwavering. He knelt before her, gently breaking the chains with a stolen hammer until the iron fell away with a clang. For the first time in years, Clara's wrists were free. She touched them, disbelief flooding her heart, then whispered, Why would you risk everything for me?" Colton's voice was quiet, almost a whisper lost in the wind. "Because no one should ever stand alone on a block meant to break them. Not while I still draw breath." The sun was dipping low when the dust finally settled, painting the horizon in hues of gold and fire. Clara and Colton walked away from the town together, the echo of the auctioneer's hammer fading into memory. Her steps were unsteady at first, the weight of years clinging to her, but every stride beside Colton felt lighter, freer. "Where will we go?" she asked softly, her eyes scanning the endless stretch of open land before them. Colton tipped his hat, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Wherever the road leads. There's a ranch out west, untouched by greed, where the land still breathes free. You'll start fresh there if you choose." Clara paused, her heart torn between fear and a yearning that burned brighter than any doubt. "And you?" she whispered. He smiled, a rare, gentle curve of his lips. "I'll be there too if you'll have me. Not as your owner, not as your savior, but as a man who believes in you." Her eyes glistened, tears spilling freely for the first time in joy rather than sorrow. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining, not in possession, but in promise. Behind them, the town that once held her captive shrank into the distance, its cruelty swallowed by the horizon. Ahead lay a future unwritten, shaped not by chains, but by choice. The cowboy had not just raised his hand to free her, he had raised it to remind the world that courage still lived, that freedom was worth every fight, and that even in the darkest places hope could still be claimed. As the wind swept across the plains and the stars began to pierce the twilight, Clara whispered, "I never thought I'd walk away." Colton's grip tightened gently, his voice steady and sure. "You didn't just walk away, Clara, you walked free." And so, under the vast western sky, they disappeared into tomorrow, not as master and servant, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two souls bound by the fire of freedom, walking toward a new horizon. If this story stirred your heart, if you felt Clara's chains break and the cowboy's courage burn within you, then don't just walk away. Hit subscribe and join us for more stories of freedom, courage, and love that rise from the dust of history. Every click keeps the fire alive, and every subscription brings another story to light.